Good evening, everybody. Okay, thanks everybody for coming back. I appreciate it. There's a lot for my confidence that people came back. Tonight, everybody, part two is we're going to talk about fasting today. So let me apologize first of all on behalf of anyone who was at Mass this morning, because Father Michael decided it would be a great idea to preach for approximately 35 minutes. I lost count after the third rosary that I got through during that. At least 35 minutes about fasting. And afterwards I said, "What's wrong with you? I've got this whole thing tonight I'm doing about it." And he was like, "I'm just priming the pump for you, brother." I was like, 35 minutes of pump priming? Okay, all right. So maybe this will be a 10-minute talk, and that'll be the end of it. I don't know. But anyway, it was a thing. But that's okay. There's always more to say about fasting, because isn't it interesting how there's always more to say about things the more arduous they are to do. Prayer, easy, cake. Fasting, maybe a little more to be said. Anyway, sort of to loop this into kind of what we were talking about last night with prayer, I spent a lot of time talking about how prayer, especially the way in which we pray as Catholics, in which we come together as the church, into the church, to be drawn up into the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, to be blessed wordlessly even by the grace that he wants to bestow upon us, for free while we're here in his presence, which we are tonight. The Mass isn't happening, but we're here in the presence of God. It's a wonderful thing. And God just kind of downloads himself into us for free. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it's the love of God that comes to us through human means. That was kind of the big thing, because when we try to relate to God in a not human way, we just get confused. That's the thing. And a lot of the time, when we pray outside of the sacramental way in which we Catholics pray, the conversation feels one-sided. A lot of the time it does. And we talked about that. And because that's just the way it is. When I'm communicating to an otherworldly being, that's probably heretical the way I just said that, but you know what I mean. When we're communicating to a God who transcends time and space, that's the better way to say that. When we're communicating with him who's in heaven, the words we get back from him are generally speaking not in a human form. They don't hit our senses. That's the thing, because we're bodily. And that's how we communicate, it's how we love, it's how we experience the world. And we were given the sacraments in particular so that our contact with God could be in the human way, which is kind of an amazing thing. Well, anyway, fasting is the way that we sort of discipline the spirit in the body. Okay, it's one of the ways, okay, but it's perhaps the primary way that throughout all of Christian history, and not just Christian, but Jewish history all the way back, and actually, even forget that, pretty much every religious tradition that's worth anything in the world has got some element of fasting in it, okay? That's something that we all share. The thing is, it's great that God made us the way that he did. It's a great thing that God has given us bodies and therefore the senses, and that we experience the world. A human being is an embodied soul. We're the composite of a body and a soul. We've got a spiritual component, and we've got what we call this natural sort of earthly component to us. We're the only being like us in the world, in the universe that we know of. There may be some other species out there forget that. Okay, we're not talking about that. Whatever. We don't know. Okay, we don't know. However, if beings came to the earth and they were speaking to us and they were not human, and they seemed to have the gift of reason, we would try to baptize them. We would start doing that. That's how it would go. But forget about it. We're not talking about UFOs or any of that stuff. All right, not the point. But anyway, we are the way we are. It's wonderful. God made us in such a way, and it's a great thing. What a shame that we ruined it immediately upon being created by God. Isn't that terrible? God says to Adam, "Here's the whole earth. Here's the world. Here's the creatures. Get out there and name everything. This is yours to kind of, be the steward of. It all belongs to me, but because I love you, it belongs to you too." And God says, "Hey, I got an even better idea than that. Go to sleep, wake up, be surprised." And men have been surprised ever since. ever since. I got that from my dad. My dad says that. But anyway, And then here's the most beautiful creature of all, Eve, woman, the apex predator of the human world. And I don't even mean that in a nasty way, though it's some things are universal, but I didn't even mean that in a nasty way. It is the case, woman is the top. The man, the male of the species, is the first thought of God. Eve, woman, the female, is the best thought of God. Yeah, isn't that a wonderful thing? Yeah, that's original. That's Jack Fitzpatrick. However, through the best comes the worst, and I'm not blaming everything on Eve. This is everybody's fault, okay? Adam needed to say, this is off topic, but I'll say it anyway. Eve talks to the snake, who's the devil. And she talks to the snake, and the snake talks to her, and she doesn't see anything wrong with it. Isn't that interesting? She's talking to a snake, and this is just, it's like petting a dog. It's like talking to a baby. It's all the same to her. You know why? Because Eve didn't name all the creatures. Adam did. Eve wasn't around. Adam named all the creatures, including Eve. So all she knows, she's perfect. She's on the top. She has no reason to suspect that anything is evil. Only Adam has the reason to suspect that. So it's not really her fault that she was talking to the snake and didn't know what was going on. It wasn't her job to know what the snake's name was or the snake's nature. Her job was just to be the most beautiful, perfect thing. And it was Adam's job to say, Eve, let me just tell you a couple things. Snakes are just always evil, okay? And if they're talking to you, they're even more evil. So whatever the snake said, it was a lie. We're getting in the car and we're going home. This is the end. This is the end. That's what should have happened. Adam is the real failure of that whole thing, okay? But that's a whole nother deal. Anyway, we were made in the way that we're made, and it's awesome, and it's a shame that we ruined it, but we did, okay? And ever since, the lives of human beings on the earth have been toil and drudgery, marked with all kinds of good things, but everything that's good we receive after a whole lot of human effort. And the things that are worth going after always require blood, sweat, and tears, always. That's the way it is, What is right is rarely what's easy, rarely, almost never. Matter of fact, if the right thing is the easiest option, boy, it's probably not the right thing. Almost always. There's exceptions to that. I can't think of any right now, but there are very few. But that is the way that we remade our own nature after our own image and likeness, okay? And God says, hey, eventually, Savior is going to come. He's going to let you back into the garden. Everything will be great. Just stand by until then. Stand by and wait for it. And of course, as we know, Jesus came. And Jesus wasn't just any kind of Savior. He was God himself. The Jews weren't expecting that. But here he is. God himself comes, dies for us, saves us from our sins. Nothing is blocking us from going to heaven. The garden is back open, but it's better than the original garden. Now it's the kingdom of heaven where we get to see God face to face. However, the machinery that's broken inside of you, it's still broken, okay? You're not liable for it, okay? No longer at fault, but it still ain't working right. That's the thing. It's still all broke down. And the case for all of us is, all right, well, what do I do? Okay? How do I live in this world? How do I acquire virtue? Well, rather, it's how do I be good? How do I be happy? How do I get some control over myself? Okay, Jesus died, and now, entrance into heaven is something that I can have, but I still have to. I still have to live in such a way that allows me to deserve it. I still have to preserve a kind of integrity, even though I'm always working with equipment that's lost its integrity. How do I do that? That's where fasting comes into play, okay? Because what we want to do while we're walking this earth, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to give our hearts to God. That's the thing. We want to be able to give our hearts to God. We want to be able to receive love from God. We want to live in relative peace. Well, we want to live in absolute peace. Relative peace is probably the closest we're going to get to that. We want space for the families that we create to grow up unperturbed by the difficulties of the world. We want to have enough food to eat. We have all the things we want to have, and we got to work for all of this because it just doesn't come naturally to us ever since the Adam and Eve saga. And however, to be able to give the mind and the heart to God, which is prayer, like we talked about last night, to be able to do that appropriately and freely, we have to deal with the fact that our human nature is broke down, and it's always directing us to do things that are not in our best interest, all the time, you know? I take myself back to last night with the smash burgers. That's a great example, you know? We had all day to make dinner. We had all afternoon to think about when we were going to do that yesterday. And I don't know what we were doing, wasting our time. I think we were watching Father Tim kill barbarians on this Roman soldier game he used to play in the seminary, and it's still fun. Wasted all kinds of time doing that, and then, you know, we didn't get these burgers until like immediately before this talk, and it was a terrible experience for me anyway. I don't know if I let that out or not, but it was very difficult. And the thing is, stupid example, but everybody knew what the timeline was. Everybody knew when to have done these things, to have made the most economical use of time so that we could have nourished our bodies appropriately and not totally overdone it like we did, and have caused discomfort for a time when you have to be in front of people, you know? And a dumb example, but how many times in your own life does your body tell you, or your mind even, you know, trying to process what your body's telling you, how many times is your mind telling you to do the thing that you know is going to get you in the most trouble? All the time, all day long, all the time. I don't know if any of you have ever read the C.S. Lewis book, The Screw Tape Letters. Great, trippy. It's actually pretty scary, to tell you the truth. You know, it's the story, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the story of two demons. And there you have an older one whose name is Screw Tape, and he's talking to his nephew, Wormwood. And anyway, and the older one is kind of tutoring this younger demon on, you know, how it is that you ruin human beings in the best possible way. It's a very C.S. It's like the opposite of Narnia, you know. It's really good, and it's pretty accessible. It's a small little book. Well, anyway, he talks about a concept in human experience that he names undulation. Okay, undulation, you know, it means waxing and waning. You know, it actually comes from a Latin word unda, which means wave. But it talks about how human life, there's kind of ups and downs. You know, there's peaks and valleys, rocks and shoals, whatever. I can't think of another dumb thing. But we've got these waves going inside of us. You know, our emotions kind of go like that. The human passions kind of go like that. Our good intentions are sometimes stronger and lesser. You know, it's kind of like working out. You know, like if you have it planned, let's just say going to do PT is something that you do every day. You like doing it in so much as that's possible, and you know that when between, you know, the hours of 3 and 5 o'clock, that's when you've got free to take an hour to go work out. And when you get the idea, there's a very short fuse of time in which you will actually follow through with that. You know, I've got the idea right now that it's time to go PT. I'm going to do it. But if I leave that, I just know that if I leave that for more than 25 minutes just sitting in my mind, it's gone forever, and the window's closed, and I'll never get it back. And I'm just now a victim to my own sloth, and that's what's going to happen to me. You know, undulation happens with all different kinds of things. And what Wormwood is kind of trying to tell Screwtape, the opposite. What Screwtape is trying to tell Wormwood is, see, this is what we have to capitalize on with human beings, okay? They're up and they're down. They're up and they're down. They're in and they're out. They've got a great idea, okay? They're strong, but before long, the weakness of their nature is going to bring them down to the valley. That's when you attack, okay? Attack when their will is depleted, when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, when they're whatever else it is. That's when they're vulnerable, okay? Don't just send it any time. You know, wait for the right time and attack. See, the devil knows that about you. The devil knows when your low time is. And he knows that's when to, you know, when you're feeling great, don't worry, because that's not when Diablo comes to get you. It's tomorrow when you're not feeling great, and he knows when that's going to be, okay? What fasting does is attempts to close the loop a little bit from the highs and the lows, okay? Because fasting essentially is this. It's when you apply bodily discipline to achieve a spiritual result in your life, okay? Applying bodily discipline to achieve a spiritual result. You know, our desire to, the human desire to, for food and drink, for sustenance, is coupled very closely to the sexual desire, that is to say, the desire to reproduce. Probably the most fundamental, just basic human urges that we have, as human beings, maybe the most primal. If we don't eat, we're going to die, and if we don't reproduce, we're going to die. All the things that the result if you don't do it is you're going to die. All of those things, they produce the most pleasure in us. They cause the most fear, and they're the things that are probably on our minds the most. Most of the time that we live. And this is exactly what the church says we've got to discipline. We've got to discipline these things, okay? Because the deal is, human beings can be manipulated to believe anything based on these kinds of desires and impulses. If Diablo can activate your kind of fight or flight response, if he can get into that kind of like framework inside your mind, and make you to believe, well, anyway, if that can happen, that's sort of the end of the game. What fasting is kind of the executive override function for us. We say, listen, okay, I know I'm hungry. I know I have to eat to maintain myself. I know that I love food. The pleasure of eating food and drink is just a wonderful thing. The better the quality and the more that I can get, that's kind of what I want. Human beings left to their own devices would eat themselves to death. We would. It kind of makes sense. Like being very fat. I mean, biologically, evolutionally speaking, it sort of makes sense to get as big as you could, because, when the winter comes, you're going to want to be able to survive, However, see, this is Diablo getting into your mind right there, thinking like that. The church says once a year, all of you Christians need to think about your relationship to essentially bodily pleasures, but we're talking about food and drink, and the amount of food and drink that you eat. Once a year, you got to start thinking about that. You got to think about it in a real way. Because there's 2 days during the period of Lent in which we're command directed to fast, okay? And those days, of course, are Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. However, during the season of Lent, on Fridays in particular, first of all, we're required, there's no meat eating, as you all know. I'm telling you this like you don't know. Of course, that's the thing. But also, we're supposed to kind of be like watching what we're eating and drinking on those days, in addition to just like not eating, the flesh of animals that are not fish. And I don't know why fish don't count as meat, but they don't. Okay, it's just one of those things. Also, beaver. You can eat beaver. Did you know that? Yeah, the medievals figured that out. They were like, we have no idea if this is a fish or an animal or a land-based thing. It swims. You know what? Probably no one wants to eat it. Go ahead, eat the beavers. Don't care about that. I'm not sure about the platypus. You could probably, if you dare, you could probably try to eat one of those things, because the whole point of this is, all right, if you are less consumed by your desire to consume, if you are less consumed by thoughts of food and drink, okay, if you've put those things to the side, like I will not be focusing on this right now. I know that I'm safe, okay? I know that I'm not going to die if I miss a meal. I know that I will have adequate strength to do the job that I need to do. Today, I will not be overly occupied by my natural urge to be sort of in the body, and I'm going to think more about what it means to be in the Spirit. I'm going to think more about what it means to be son or daughter of God. I'm going to think about my relationship with Him just as it is itself, and I'm not going to let my disordered human desires get in the way, okay? And that's what fasting does. It heightens the sense of the divine in our lives, okay? Because when we remove kind of the most fundamental preoccupation of human existence, will I have enough food to survive? The question then is, what is the next most important thing that I'm thinking about? And that sure as heck better be God, maybe it's the safety of my family might be the next most important thing, okay? But that ought to be at least next to God, and if not, maybe slightly subjugated to it. I take that back. It must be subjected to your love of God. Sorry, what am I talking about? That's how God's got to be number one no matter what, okay? It has to be. Because you can end up worshiping your family in place of God. That's a possibility that we've got to not do. But that's not the point of this. Fasting clears the most basic preoccupation so that I can allow something else to move into that place. And it is just incredible what that can do for you. I mean, it really is. Here I am up here talking about it, but as human beings, because we're bodily, we are always thinking about our survival. There's no way we can't. There is an amount of intellectual bandwidth that is dedicated to us surviving and to us making it through another day. And if you take the desire for food, the necessity for food, and move it out of there, all of a sudden you're left with an incredible amount of power to think about something else, to be consumed with other things. And when you put God into the crosshairs of that, boy, do wonderful things happen. They really do. All of a sudden, my sort of spiritual sight, it's like it's made more pure for a second. It's kind of like when I don't know if you've ever looked through night vision goggles. There's the little thing where you can twist the little aperture, and all of a sudden it gets super bright. Especially if you're in the Marine Corps and you have the most terrible version of night vision goggles that exist. For a second, it's almost like it's working. That's kind of what fasting does for you. You push this button, and just for a little bit of time, because we cannot be fasting for super long periods. We can't be doing it. We can only executive override the need to survive for so long. Okay, before the body just says, forget it. We're going back to thinking about food again. Okay, but for a short period of time, you can do it. Okay, and that's why it's only one time a year and on certain days that the church says, Christians, you're going to fast. Okay, you're going to put God right in the middle of the sight aperture right there, and you're going to take a long look. And the thing is, God's looking at you. That's perhaps the most important thing. Yeah, sure, we can see God more clearly, and we can. Love him more dearly. I could not say God's spell. I've never actually seen that. That was for a long time. That was like the only thing that priests would talk about. I remember when I was graduating high school, the priests actually sang God's spell at my at our graduation baccalaureate mass. I almost didn't go to the seminary because of that. I was so embarrassed for his sake. But fasting allows us to see God more clearly. But you know what? It allows him. See, whenever we're looking at God, he's looking back at us. Okay. And the clarity with which I can see him, okay, is the gosh, how do you say that in reverse for what God can do? I'm thinking about it right now. The clarity with which we can see him is the amount of power we have given him to change our lives. Because the whole thing is, God is waiting out there. He's waiting for us to invite him in. He's patient. He's a gentleman. And he does not force himself on us. He does not come into our lives if we haven't asked him specifically. Because he wants us to love him authentically. He doesn't want to. God knows that if he forces our love for him, we have to comply. You can't not comply with what God does. He's all powerful. So he stays and waits for you to invite him in. And when you remove some of the disordered passions that are broken human nature, that's our fault, kind of cause us to lose sight of it. When we brush those things aside and look at God, and he looks back at us, he says, I've got a much clearer sight picture on how to engage with you. I can see exactly fire mission. I'm ready to go right now at any time. I'm ready to send my love to you in a way that you haven't had it before. You're creating a target-rich environment for God. That's the idea, okay? And we do that insofar as we can clear the rubble out of the way, all right? And it relates to our own prayer because, gosh, for a while when you fast, automatically your prayer becomes a bit more focused, and it becomes clearer. And this time of Lent is the time that we have to really, really, really do some hard things, things that we don't like, to remedy what our first parents did all those years ago by letting their own earthly passions get in the way. We say, okay, God, you gave me this human nature, and I broke it. And I'm very sorry, and I can't fix what's broken. You've graciously, kind of weighted the test here, so that I'm not gonna fail in the end if I give you my best. However, right now, in a kind of an aggressive forward push, I'm gonna push myself past my broken need to just survive. I'm gonna focus on thinking about thriving in your love. I'm going to do that. I'm going to push myself into the red so that you can love me. And God says that's exactly what I want. And the interesting thing is he says, I don't need you to stay in the red, everybody. I'm asking for a couple of days. That's what I'm asking you for. I'm asking you for a couple of days. And you know what? I'm asking you for a month, a little over a month's worth of time of kind of denying yourself so that I can be a bigger thing. Because over the course of the year, what have we been doing? We've been going up and down, up and down in our lives. We've had victories, we've had defeats. We've had things that we can be super proud of, and then we've had times that, gosh, I don't even want to look the Virgin Mother in the eye and tell her about what I did this time. There's times that happens. And God says, I know. But you know what? We can shrink the distance between valleys a little bit by applying some discipline. And that's essentially what it does, okay? Allows God to see you more closely. He can always see you the way he wants. God knows everything all the time. But when you see him clearly, you're inviting him more deeply into your life. That's the idea. And when God sees the holes to fill, boom, there he is. He doesn't wait. He attacks what's bad and what's wrong in you immediately. When you give him the opportunity. And the idea is just to make a little bit of marginal growth. That's the thing. Lent is not here to change your life 100%. Lent is not here so that by the end of it, you are a completely different person than you were when you started. Hopefully in the course of your life, you got 85 Lents to do. And that's either it's a blessing or a curse, depending on how you're thinking about that. Hopefully you got at least 85 Lents that you're going to go through in your life, okay? More even. Maybe some of you have more of that now. That's wonderful. I hope you have 1,000. That's too much. No one wants to be alive for that long. Nobody. Hopefully you have 93 Lents. That's what I hope. I just made that up out of nowhere. I'm looking for a solid 58, and I think I'm ready to go. But anyway, that's the deal. That this Lent is supposed to be to close the gap between the valleys just a little bit, and the next year is supposed to close it a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then one day you'll wake up and you'll say, "Gosh, I don't recognize the person I was 10 years ago." And you know what? That's for a lot of reasons. I've got 10 years more experience, but you know what? For 10 years, for a period of every year, I fasted. And I pushed past my survival instinct. I pushed past my innate gluttony and my innate laziness and sloth. I pushed past a bunch of things. And I looked more clearly upon the face of God. And I was changed ever so slightly each time. But after 10 years, I was changed quite a bit, It's a big deal. And fasting is not something that you can only do during Lent. There's all kinds of times throughout the year. Every Friday really is a day to think about what you're eating and drinking. It is not a hard commandment that every Friday you have to give up meat. It's a shame that it isn't. We should probably go back to that for a number of different reasons. But it's important for us to think about the ways that we are failing in our bodies that are keeping our spirits from being where we want them to be. Because sometimes we can fall into this trap and say, all right, I got my spiritual life over here, got my natural human body life over here, the things are separate, okay? How do I nourish my life of prayer? By praying, by talking to God, by going to church, by whatever else. How do I engage in my natural life? By being successful, strong, keeping my body healthy, reading some books from time to time, all that kind of stuff. And both of those things are true with the exception of one part of it, which is that they're separate. They're not. Everything about us is woven together, And our spiritual life affects our life in the body, and our life of the body affects our life in the spirit. And I think the temptation is to forget that our life in the body affects the life of the spirit, as if somehow it supersedes it, but the two are just inextricably linked, okay? Which is why it's not good to be massively overweight, even though naturally speaking, you might be thinking, the body is saying, oh, no, store up all that extra energy so that when the winter comes and the evil people attack, you can survive. But in reality, see, that's the devil just tweaking it a little bit, and we're getting it wrong. Fasting is super important because it allows us to see God more clearly and allows our spiritual lives to blossom. If we did not discipline our bodies, our prayer would not progress. It wouldn't. Because when human bodily laziness takes over, there is no way for us to be spiritually adroit. You cannot be spiritually quick if you're physically slow of your own doing. Okay, some of us are just slow. That's not what I'm talking about. If you have made yourself physically weak, spiritually, You just cannot be strong. That's just how it is. It's something we got to think about. Another thing about fasting, we've talked about what it does for God, but what it does for us is really important. Okay, because a lot of the time as we go through life, if you're a responsible person, if you have any speck of Irish blood or whatever else, you feel like you're failing a lot. Okay, we have failures all the time. Especially when you're trying to do things that are good. One time, listen to this. So I was at one of my parishes. This is in Raytown, Missouri. It was kind of in the hood a little bit. In this one parish, Our Lady of Lourdes, I had this group of nuns there. And these nuns, there were only 4 of them, or maybe there were 5, these little nuns. They're all little. I don't know how that is, but all these little nuns. And you know what their mission was? They would go regularly to far eastern Russia, to the city of Vladivostok. And they had established a convent there. This is, in the 80s when the Iron Curtain came down, a couple of American priests just got on a plane and showed up there and said, hey, we're here to kind of start this Christianity again. Let's see about that. And it was this whole, anyway, there's a whole story. It's very interesting. These nuns heard about that and said, hey, we'd like to be a part of that. I bet you need nuns over there. And they said, yes, we do. So come on over. And they lived half of the year at my little parish, and then half of the year they were in Russia because they could not stay. They had to always be coming back to renew their visas and things like that. So they were there at this parish. And they would invite me to come pray with them sometimes. And their end of the day prayers, they would do an examination of conscience, and they would do an act of contrition together. Except for their act of contrition, it was the most horrifying thing I'd ever heard in my life. I'd never heard this. First of all, they sang it in their pretty little nun voices. Like, this is so nice. But here's how they did it, though. They said, forget, it was like, forgive me. I forget the exact words, but it was something like, forgive us for the evil we have done today, the good we have failed to do, and here's the one, and the good that we have done badly today. Man, talk about it. It had to have been Irish. I mean, there's no other way. The good things that I did badly. Can you imagine? That is a whole nother level of self-flagellation. The good that I did badly today. But they're not wrong. They're not wrong about that. I mean, how many times when you're trying to do what's good, you kind of do a half measure of it? You know what I mean? It happens all the time. And listen, it's not like what the devil wants you to believe about that is that makes it evil, okay? That if I do a good thing, but I don't send it all the way and just kind of half do it, now I've done an evil thing. False. You just could have done more good. You know what I mean? So don't. And I even mentioned that to the Mother Superior one time. I was like, is the third category also a sin? And she was like, well, I've never thought of it like that. Well, how could you not think of it like that? I'm just sitting here horrified that you all think you're all going to hell because of the good you didn't do well today. But the reality is, when we think about all the stuff that we do, the good, the evil, and the good maybe that we could have done better, kind of like Oskar Schindler at the end of Schindler's List, after he had saved all of those people, and he's thinking about all the others he could have saved. What an amazing man, and the story of that. If we look at our lives in a certain way, we can just see a whole series of failures. From the beginning of the day when you wake up, when you hit your snooze one or too many times, every time you hit the snooze button is a failure. I don't care what you have to say; it's a failure. I fail all the time, regularly. Matter of fact, I'm with this artillery battalion, and last week we were in the field and we took all of our guns and stuff to the, out in the woods for a week, and it's gross. There's no showering or anything like that, and it gets to be pretty weird man land, like right away, and it just devolves, just absolute devolution of the human person. Well, anyway, so we're out there and. The good, the failure. Oh, yeah. So it was like, hey, everybody, reveille is at, 05:45, this morning. Everyone's like, okay, all right, So, I'm sleeping in this, actually, we were in this weird warehouse this time, long story, but, and I'm sleeping next to, 35 of America's finest Marines in this thing. And starting at about 4:45 is when everyone's alarms are going off. you know? And then here you have one kid's alarm going off and the other kid's alarm's going off, and they've got these different little ringtones, you know? And no one's doing anything. I mean, no one's getting awake. It's just the gunny said, everyone, if you got to be awake at 5:45, you better set your alarm for 4:45, you know? And if I don't hear it, you're going to get killed. Well, then anyway, so the alarms are all going off and no one's doing anything about it because who wants to be up at that time? And if Gunny said it, might as well just not do it, ignore it, because he's going to yell at me either way, whether I'm awake or not. Anyways, all these alarms start going off until finally Gunny comes out and screams at everybody to... He screamed some things that I can't repeat. It was very, very demeaning to everyone and their human character. But the whole thing is because of all the failures of hitting snooze and not caring about it. But anyway, one failure at the beginning of the day to the end. That's the thing. It can be like that. And what fasting does, one of the things, and sometimes we don't think about it like this, it gives you a win. You know, if I fasted today and I accomplished that, that's a success story for me. And, you know, sometimes in the spiritual life, you just need to have some wins, you know? Like you need to have some things that you've accomplished, and you look back on the day and said, you know what, God, I did this for you. And I didn't eat the food that I could have eaten. I did that for your holy name, and that was a win for me today, you know? That's a good thing. You know, Lent is a time, if nothing else, to pick up a little bit of spiritual momentum, you know? And fasting is something that it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power to do. You just do it. You know, you just muscle through it. You don't have to think about it really. You don't have to, it's not a metaphysical exercise. You just say, I'm not eating this meal today. And then it's done. And you got to win. And it's a good thing. And God says, I love that. I love that you got to win today. You know, how about next Friday you get another win? You know, how about Tuesday? Maybe you get a win every time you try this. You know, and by the end of Lent, maybe you're more confident than you were before in where you stand before God. And maybe you're more confident on other things you can do in the spiritual life as well. You know? Something to think about, because the human benefits of fasting, and I'm not talking about, it's like all the doctors are talking about intermittent fasting as a health thing today. I don't care about that. It's whatever, okay? However, if something is good for you spiritually, it's going to be good for you physically as well. Okay, so it doesn't surprise me at all. You know, like they say that if you meditate during the day, that's good for your health. Surprise, surprise, we've known that for thousands of years. I'm glad the doctors caught up with that. You know, wonderful, but it's not like that's new. Yeah, breaking news, meditation is good for you human beings. Really. Appreciate that. I had a Marine tell me that one time. He said, hey, sir, do you know that it's actually, it can be, the scientists prove that it's a good thing to meditate? I was like, no, bud, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. I'll put that on the commander's update brief next week. Anyway, my kind have been doing this for 2,000 years, but I'm glad you told me, Lance Corporal. That was great. Anyway, but the point is that the benefits of fasting are all over the place, okay? And we don't really engage in this kind of activity enough because it's hard to do, you know? And you've got to get over a lot of your own stuff. And we've got to override the very first problem that we created for ourselves to do it, okay? We do. But God, there is really no better invitation for God to come into your life than say, I'm going to go in my own heart back to that place where we first ruined this, okay? I'm going to go back to that place where the ultimate greed lies and where the ultimate self-interest is and where the ultimate pride is. You know, because all the way back to Adam and Eve, that's what it was. It was kind of a prurient interest in things that we didn't have any business knowing or thinking about. You know, it was the devil says, hey, listen, you eat from this tree and God's hiding you the secret knowledge, you know, and he's keeping you from knowing and being all different kinds of things. If you eat this fruit, then you're going to be like God. Don't you want that? And Adam and Eve said, yeah, we do. We want to be like God. It wasn't good enough to have been made by him. And it wasn't good enough to just obey what he said and be happy forever. We got to be like God now. And the talking snake told us, and we trust him, and that's what we're going to do. And we go back to that place in your mind, in your heart, where the first human selfishness began to reign. And you say, all right, I can't fix that. And selfishness reigns in my heart. God, it reigns. And I wish it didn't, but it does. So here's what I'm going to do. I can't fix it, and I can't and won't promise you that tomorrow it's not going to rain, because that's foolish, because it always will, okay? But I will allow you to reign in spite of it. In spite of the evil, the throne of evil is right here, and it exists in my heart. Your throne is on top. and it's bigger. And I've created the space for it to exist by saying, no body of mine, I'm better than my urges. At least today, I'm better than that. I've been claimed by God, and he deserves to have a throne here. The throne the devil has planted on me is there by force, and I can't fix where it is. But through fasting, I can create the place for the throne of God that he puts there out of love when I ask for it to be there. I can allow that to reign in my heart. And I'm going to give that to you today, God. Today, you get to be number one. Fasting does that. It's an incredible thing. There is nothing like it. It's been said by the ancients that fasting is the soul of prayer. Fasting is the soul of prayer. It's like medicine for the will. I think St. Francis de Sales says, like medicine for the will. What medicine is for the body, fasting is for the will, for the spirit, because it is a fundamental, it is a human act. It's an act that you make with full consent of your will. Just like sinning, just like to commit a mortal sin is to engage the full consent of your will to do something contrary to the law of God. Fasting is kind of the reverse of that. It's saying, okay, with full consent of my will, I will take mastery for this short period of time over the fundamental disordered desire of my life so that God can reign in that place. That's what it is. The devil flees from it. Jesus himself says that some demons can only be cast out by fasting. That's why. The throne of God has to be established on the human heart, and we do it by fasting. It's an incredible thing. And it's something that, people out there will it's interesting, like every Lent starts with Ash Wednesday, and there's a bajillion people in church, and everyone's coming on Ash Wednesday. It's a cultural deal. You get stuff for free. Everyone knows you went to church. You get credit for that. The politicians all have it, outrageous. Priests are very cynical. It's kind of like also like on Christmas Day too. Priests get cynical. It's like, oh, look at all these people I've never seen before, never see again. I'm going to pretend like I'm happy you're here. I'm going to pretend. That's all I'm going to do is pretend, because you're ticking me off, with your hypocrisy. But whatever, who am I to judge, right? It's kind of my play, honest to God, in church. But outside of that, though, people come to and will participate in Lent a little bit. I've got a lot of Marines, by the way, that will say, "Hey, what are you giving up for Lent, chaps? What are you doing for Lent this year?" And I'll tell them what I'm doing. And what are you guys doing? Oh, I'm giving up this or that or whatever. One of them even said he was giving up dip for Lent, and I thought, oh, good luck. That's like oxygen for the United States Marine Corps. There's no way to get around. There's no way to get around it. I don't, it's to talk about. It might even be like a readiness issue if they didn't. But and that's a great thing, and to give things up for Lent is good, and to kind of do it surface level, is great. But listen, to fast is to bring the big guns to bear. Fasting is really what God wants us to do. A little bit of, in a moderated way, okay? Fasting is not here to hurt you. We're not commanded to fast so that you can just inflict pain on your body to counteract the pleasurable things you shouldn't be doing. That's not the point, okay? It's not to hurt yourself. It's not to cause pain. It's not to, take the sins of your soul out through your body, none of that. It's to allow the grace of God to reign over the faults of Adam and Eve that rages in us even though Jesus has risen from the dead, okay, and put that demon to rest. That's what it's all about, and that's what fasting allows us to do. And if we're doing Lent and we're not fasting, partial credit, anybody doing anything for God is good, and who am I to speak against that? But it's not doing it right, okay? See, that would be the good you did badly today. If I gave something up for Lent and I didn't eat candy and that was wonderful and I love God, okay, you know what? That's at least a win. That's something in the W column. But that's the 60% solution. It's nowhere close to what God wants, because what God wants is for you to be free, and he wants you to be happy, and he wants you to be unimpeded even by your own base desires. And you only do that by giving in until it hurts a little bit. That's how it happens. And if you think that's too hard, remember that time that Jesus was crucified for you. There's my Italian mom again. Remember that time that Jesus died for you, and you're wondering whether or not he loves you because you stubbed your toe? Yeah, Mom, I remember that. Yeah, I'm sorry for being so weak. But next to an Italian mom, you're only ever weak. You're the weakest one in the room. That's how that works. Another thing that we should think about fasting is this. Okay, and this will be the last thing. That a lot of time, one of our biggest frustrations as human beings is that we can't stop sinning completely. St. Augustine says that it is not possible for us not to sin. Wrap your mind, that's confusing. Not possible not to sin. Okay? There is no way that as human beings we can completely 100% stop sinning. Okay? There's a lot of people that believe if you're just good enough, you could not sin, you could be perfect. You can't. You can't do it. I'm just telling you right now. If you think that, you're wrong. And you're not bad, you're just wrong. Okay? There's no way to stop sinning. And there are certain things that we are going to always be doing wrong as long as we live. I've heard it said before, this is actually kind of a damaging thing that priests sometimes will get wrong in confession. Like they'll say, hey, penitent, you come here every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks, or this is a random situation that I'm pulling out of nowhere, okay? But I've just heard things like this reported. And you always tell me the same thing, You're always doing the same things wrong, and you're not growing, okay? So fix yourself, because you're not growing the way you're supposed to be, and you're wasting my time. I've actually heard that. Talk about priests going to hell, man. If that's the way you do it, right there. That's when the door opens up and you go to hell that very moment. I think that's how that Yzma pulls the lever. That's it. Well, but I've heard stories of that happening. And listen, that's just fundamentally, completely, and totally wrong. And here's why. Okay, here's why. A sign of spiritual maturity, and I really do mean spiritual maturity, is when you get to that point in your life in which the sins that you confess are the ones you will probably never, ever get rid of in your life. These are the dregs of what's broken in your human nature that are just, you're not going to step to the side. Maybe this week you were better at, you did not allow yourself to become as angry as you did last week. And that's a good win for this week, but you still got angry because you did badly, Turns out there's a lot of instances of that, aren't there? Yeah. That's uncomfortable. That's an uncomfortable reality. And then maybe next week, you know what? You were less gluttonous than you were the week before, and that's a win. That's a win for you, but you were still gluttonous. That's the thing. There are certain things that we're just never going to get rid of from our lives. And sometimes that causes people to be, to despair, to feel really bad. Gosh, so that means I'm a failure forever, no matter what I do. But here's the thing. Living a life of virtue, you can get to that point where you're not committing extra sins. And you're doing your best. If you could push a button and get rid of all your sins today, you would. But that button's not going to appear, And what do I do? Well, the thing is, when you've exhausted the list of things you can change, the things you can reasonably expect to change in your own life. And these are just the circumstances now, and these are the weaknesses that I have, and these will be the things that I always are exploited in me and I always lose. Now, however, you can think about all the things in your life you can control and you can change, Okay, how about that irritating person that's in my life that I have to speak to every day when I'm leaving Mass? I'm making this up again. How about that irritating person that wants to have a 30-minute conversation with me every day when I'm leaving Mass about her Yadro collection? That's what she's talking about. You guys know what Yadro is? I'm ashamed that I do, tell you the truth. But old priests love collecting Yadro. That's why I want to live till I'm 58. That's why I want to die at 58, so I don't get into the Yadro phase of priest life. But and that person wants to talk to you about that, and it's just irritating. And you're trying to leave the side door. You're trying to avoid this person. It's just so irritating. You know what? You can't control how irritated you are, and you can't control your thoughts of gluttony, and you can't control your lust. But you know what you can do? You can engage that person once a week. You see, you can be kind. You can be kind once a week to that person. You can say, "Hey, I can't stop being judgmental, but you know what I can do? I can go work at a soup kitchen one day a week. I can do that. That's the way I can show God my love. Yeah, sure, I can't get past my sins all the way, but I can do more good things. I can kind of work it off like that. And the point of this is, and I can fast. I can fast from time to time as my circumstances and as my health and as my body allows. I can fast from time to time. If I'm feeling really, really bad about my failures, I've always got to win if I fast today. I've always got to win in my pocket, no matter what. Because I can always say, today, God, I failed because I ignored Father Michael's homily because I was thinking about how he took all of my good material and I'm ticked off about it. And I want him to know, and I brought it up all day long today, all day. I told all kinds of people. But you know what? You know what I could do, though? Okay, I can't change that, but I could pray for him. I haven't, but I could. And I could fast. And even if I can't pray for him because I'm so mad, because I am, okay? And even if I did that, I could still fast. I can fast because that's a win I can have, and that's a way that I can run off the fact that I was a jerk earlier, after somebody was a jerk before to me. I could do that. So anyway, guys, fasting is the soul of prayer. Okay, it's the soul of prayer because it goes to the very beginning of where we hurt ourselves and decided we were better than God, and it says, God, all that to the contrary, please reign here. Reign where it hurts the most, where I need you the most. Be there for me right now, today. As long as I can sustain this, as long as I can give you this place, please be here and be with me and make me better. I can see you more clearly. You can see me more clearly. Establish your throne and make it great. And give me everything I need to be better. And it's a win because God is nourishing you more. He's making you better. And you got some confidence that you did a good thing. You did a good thing today. And for all the evil things that we do, there's always good that you can do to overcome that, Not to make yourself stop, not to stop the undulating, not to fix what's essentially broken, okay? But to counterbalance the facts of those, to counterbalance the reality of those things that you can't change. Fasting is probably the best tool in our arsenal for that, okay? So keep it in mind. As we go through the rest of Lent here, do I dare to enter into fasting in a more intentional way? When Friday comes around, is there a meal that I can go without? Or forget even food. Is there just some pleasurable thing that you enjoy that's good, by the way? But fasting is when you don't do things that are good, okay? You don't get credit if you stop doing bad things, because you should have already stopped that. You know what I'm saying? Marines will tell me that. Guess what I gave up for Lent? And I won't say because things they do are horrible, but I gave up some sin for Lent. What do you think about that, Padre? Well, that's good, and I just leave it at that. I don't tell them it doesn't really count because there's no way to tell a Lance criminal that. You know what I mean? There's no way to anything good that you're doing is I like that. Okay, but you don't get to give up sins for Lent. You know what I mean? It has to be good things that you're going to do without. Is there some other good thing that I enjoy? Maybe my afternoon tea, maybe my 11sies, maybe my whatever it is. Is there something that I can say? You know what? Not today. Not today, because God, I want you to reign more perfectly in my heart. This is the kind of stuff that we ought to be thinking about. They're wins. They allow God to reign in us. They allow God to see us. They allow God to establish control over us where it hurts the most. It's an ancient spiritual practice, and the greats say that fasting is the soul of our prayer. So if we want to live with God forever, if we want to abide in His love, the way that we keep ourselves there, at least one of the greatest ways that we do, is to fast. And to do it periodically, and to put our whole hearts into it. The smallest little act can be the biggest thing, when you do it with full intent of the will, knowing that by that act, God will reign in your life. It's a wonderful thing. Do not let the opportunity pass by, Don't let fasting be another one of the good things that you did badly today. Do it all the way, okay? And God will reward you richly. Thanks. We'll see you tomorrow.